Have you been stuck in a situation where you cannot get somebody to commit, where an organization isn't moving forward and you're sure that your solution is the best one in the marketplace? This is part 3, going through a checklist to give you the information you need to ensure you're going to close the sale. So there are 3 different types of prospects you encounter. The first one has a budget. So for the prospect that has a budget, ask further questions. Make sure you've got the right people identified that are part of that process, and you qualify that there is a sufficient budget for your company's solution. The second we call a negative no, or a negative Norman, if you will, those with no budget. Ask questions to determine how they're going to fix the problem, because it wouldn't be meeting if they didn't have a problem. And that's the other thing to ask is, why are you meeting if you don't have a budget? Sometimes it's a smoke screen. The third is the negative, what I call a negative Ned. Those who may have a budget, but they're unwilling to divulge the budget. They're being very secretive buyers. So how do you know if they can afford your services? One way to do it, ask for a ballpark budget. Can you give us an idea of the budget that's allocated? Is it $500,000 or $1.5 million? See if you can work through the ballpark estimate of a budget. And then if you can't, determine if it's worthwhile for you and that prospect to continue discussions. Even ask them, put that back on their plate. The other thing, before you present, we have an agreement that's called a pre-presentation agreement. Before you make a presentation with the full budget, hopefully you haven't done that at this juncture, is what are the emotional reasons for buying? As humans, we buy for emotional reasons, and it may be an impact on specific buyers individually, and you need to recount that. We talked about different types of buying influences. It needs to be restated to them the impact it's going to have on their lives by implementing this solution. I went through a scenario where one of my clients, we'd go through the impact on his budget, and not only his budget, but his bonus for the next year, what impact that had. Confirm the financial resources are available to buy, like we had just mentioned. Get an agreement from the prospect to say no if your product or service doesn't solve their problem. It's difficult for people especially in the North American cultures, to say no. Ask them to say no so you don't get strung out and a sales manager on your ass for the next 9 months wanting to know why it hasn't closed. Better to get it out of the pipeline if it's unqualified, ask for the no. Difficult thing to do, but move on to the next qualified opportunity. The next thing is get an agreement from the prospect to say yes if the product does solve the problem, and then what the next steps would be, who else you need to meet with. Get that list of items. If the client says no, then you move on. If the client says think it over, to me that is as good as a no. Move on from that point. And then have an agreement in place for ongoing communication, that when you get a hold of them, they're going to respond blah, 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 by text, email, by phone, whatever it is. Have an ongoing agreement for communication. That's part of setting up yourself for success. Tomorrow we're going to talk about emotional reasons for buying.